Forget everything you thought you knew about the global power play. Just when you thought things couldn't get more volatile, Donald Trump unleashes a fury aimed squarely at Vladimir Putin. We're talking about a threat so massive it could cripple Russia's economy overnight and send shock waves through your wallet. What did Putin say that pushed Trump over the edge? It involves Ukraine, legitimacy, and a statement that reportedly left Trump seeing red. Now, secondary tariffs, a devastating economic weapon targeting any nation buying Russian oil, are on the table. India, China, nobody is safe. But there's more. Whispers of B-2 bombers near Iran, a secret conversation on a golf course that might have changed everything, and a high-stakes phone call that could determine the fate of millions. Is this just bluster, or are we on the brink of an economic war unlike anything we've ever seen? Stay tuned, because the pieces are moving fast, and the truth behind these power moves is more shocking than you can imagine. U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly reacted with significant displeasure to recent statements made by Russian President Vladimir Putin concerning Ukraine. Sources indicate Trump expressed strong disapproval after Putin publicly questioned the credibility of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In a dramatic escalation, Trump has declared his readiness to impose severe secondary tariffs on all oil originating from Russia. This potential economic maneuver signifies a major policy threat. The proposed tariffs would mean that any nation purchasing oil from Russia could face prohibitions on conducting business activities within the United States. This development unfolds against a backdrop where Putin has publicly articulated a desire for peace in Ukraine. However, these statements contrast with reports indicating consistent rejection of ceasefire proposals and ongoing military operations affecting Ukrainian civilians. Observers suggest Trump's patience has reached its limit. Russia now potentially faces a severe economic impact, as Trump has specifically mentioned the possibility of massive tariffs targeting not only Russian oil directly, but also nations considered allies or significant trading partners of Russia. Reports confirm Trump had previously communicated the potential for such actions to Moscow. Despite these prior indications, Putin has reportedly shown no movement towards agreeing to a ceasefire. Consequently, Russia confronts one of the most challenging economic scenarios since the conflict began. Further details emerged, suggesting the scope of the potential sanctions. Information received indicates Trump conveyed his frustration regarding Putin's stance, specifically threatening the implementation of secondary tariffs on Russian oil exports. If Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, I am going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia, Trump was quoted as stating. Sources familiar with Trump's thinking suggest these tariffs could reach a level of 25% and might be implemented imminently. It was also reported that Trump intends to communicate directly with President Putin within the week. The president explicitly linked his consideration of these harsh economic measures to Putin's recent remarks challenging Zelensky's standing and discussing potential changes in Ukrainian leadership. Secondary tariffs function as a powerful economic weapon. They are not applied directly to Russia, as direct U.S.-Russia trade is relatively limited. Instead, these tariffs target third countries engaged in purchasing Russian goods, particularly oil. Nations such as India and China are highlighted as examples. These countries possess substantial trade relationships with the United States and rely heavily on exporting goods to Western markets. The imposition of secondary tariffs would significantly increase the landed cost of goods from countries like India and China in crucial markets such as the U.S. and Europe. Such price increases could create substantial economic difficulties for these nations, potentially compelling them to cease purchasing Russian oil. This outcome would, in turn, apply enormous pressure on President Putin, potentially forcing him towards negotiations aimed at achieving a mutually acceptable agreement. Adding complexity to the situation are recent comments attributed to President Putin. The Russian leader reportedly suggested that Ukraine might benefit from a United Nations-led administration, asserting that the current government in Kiev lacks legitimacy due to the absence of recent elections. These remarks questioning the Ukrainian government's standing appear to have particularly provoked the U.S. president. Putin allegedly elaborated on the difficulties of negotiation, citing the alleged influence of certain groups within Ukraine and questioning who holds the authority to sign binding agreements. He reportedly referenced international precedents involving temporary, external administration under UN supervision as a potential path towards establishing a legitimate government through democratic elections, which could then negotiate a lasting peace treaty recognized globally. These remarks concerning external administration and legitimacy have drawn significant international attention. In a swift rebuttal, the United States administration publicly dismissed Russian President Vladimir Putin's suggestions regarding the legitimacy of the Ukrainian government and the potential need for a UN-led administration. A White House statement declared unequivocally, Ukraine's government is defined by its constitution and its people, and it's completely legitimate. This official response highlights the stark disagreement between Washington and Moscow over the status of the Kiev leadership. The timing of Putin's comments questioning Ukrainian legitimacy has raised eyebrows, particularly given reports of ongoing negotiation efforts involving both Ukrainian and Russian representatives, sometimes facilitated by international actors, including potentially under past U.S. administration initiatives. Observers point to the apparent contradiction. Engaging diplomatically with a government while simultaneously challenging its fundamental right to govern or negotiate binding agreements. Putin's stance implies that the United States is conferring with an entity lacking the proper authority, a position analysts suggest could significantly complicate efforts to broker peace. Adding to the volatile situation are reports alleging repeated violations of agreed-upon ceasefires by Russian forces. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has publicly accused Russia of persistently targeting civilian populations and infrastructure, despite Moscow's outward expressions of seeking peace. Zelensky cited specific incidents, such as a recent strike on Kharkiv, which reportedly resulted in civilian deaths and numerous injuries. While acknowledging the efforts of emergency responders, Zelensky presented these attacks as evidence of Russia's failure to uphold ceasefire commitments. President Zelensky provided further details on the scope of recent military actions, claiming that over the past week, widespread attacks across Ukraine involved approximately 1,300 guided aerial bombs, more than 1,000 attack drones, predominantly identified as Iranian-made Shahed models, and multiple missiles, including ballistic variants. He asserted that Ukrainian air defenses successfully intercepted a substantial number of these threats. Zelensky accused Russia of deliberately extending the conflict and stated that Kyiv regularly shares detailed intelligence on Russian strikes and planned operations with its international partners. He issued a call for a decisive international response from the United States, Europe, and allied nations to counter what he described as terror against our people. Zelensky also underscored the critical need for consistent and predictable military aid, specifically mentioning air defense systems and investments in Ukraine's domestic defense industry as vital for national protection. Visual evidence reportedly corroborates claims of significant damage to civilian infrastructure far from active front lines, impacting non-combatant populations. These developments follow reports that Russian spokesperson Dmitry Medvedev publicly confirmed Russia's withdrawal from a previously announced 30-day truce agreement. Subsequent reports detailed renewed aerial bombardments and strikes allegedly targeting civilian structures and citizens. The prevalence of drone warfare continues to be a major factor. Reports suggest Russia faces limitations in its indigenous drone production capacity. Conversely, Ukraine, starting from a reportedly minimal base in 2022, is now described as possessing a robust drone manufacturing and innovation capability, with alleged production figures exceeding 1 million units per year. This rapid development has reportedly attracted international interest, with other nations seeking to learn from Ukraine's wartime drone advancements. Russia's drone campaign heavily relies on external suppliers, primarily Iran, which provides the Shahed-type drones frequently implicated in attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. This reliance on Iranian military technology has apparently become a focus for U.S. President Donald Trump. In remarks attributed to him, Trump addressed the deployment of Iranian drones in Ukraine, acknowledging their quantity and effectiveness. He designated Iran as a significant area of concern and alluded to recent direct communication, reportedly a letter demanding Iran make a decisive choice between negotiation or facing unspecified but severe repercussions. U.S. President Donald Trump has reportedly intensified his warnings towards Iran, signaling potential military action and economic penalties. This development occurs alongside reports indicating the strategic positioning of 7 B-2 bombers near Iran's borders. Trump reiterated his stance on a potential nuclear deal, stating that secondary tariffs are under consideration if an agreement is not reached. Sources quote Trump delivering a stark ultimatum. If they don't make a deal, there will be bombing, and it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before. This aggressive posture towards Iran is viewed by observers as part of a broader strategy aimed at isolating Russian President Vladimir Putin. The message appears clear. Nations supporting Russia could face severe consequences. Speculation suggests that Putin's allies might reconsider their positions if Russia fails to engage constructively in negotiations aimed at ending the conflict in Ukraine. Significant attention is now focused on a potential upcoming phone call between Trump and Putin. This communication is anticipated to be a critical juncture. Reports suggest Russia is prepared to present evidence alleging Ukrainian responsibility for ceasefire violations. However, counter-narratives firmly assert that Russia initiated the conflict and bears responsibility for ongoing attacks on civilian populations. Analysts suggest Putin seeks to avoid being publicly perceived as the primary obstacle to peace, even while allegedly resisting a genuine ceasefire. Information indicates that the previous Trump administration communicated that a failure by Russia to negotiate in good faith could result in significantly increased military support for Ukraine, encompassing more advanced weaponry. Furthermore, the prospect of intensified economic pressure looms, including stricter enforcement of existing sanctions and the implementation of comprehensive secondary sanctions targeting Russia's trading partners. Russia's economic position makes absorbing such measures highly challenging. This context reportedly explains the difficulties encountered in ceasefire negotiations. While Ukraine is said to agree unconditionally to proposed ceasefires, Russia allegedly introduces numerous preconditions, even for temporary truces like a 30-day pause. The fundamental purpose of such a short-term ceasefire, halting hostilities to facilitate substantive negotiations, is undermined by these alleged preconditions. This approach fuels speculation that Putin is hesitant to engage directly with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Additional analysis suggests concerns within the Kremlin regarding the potential domestic impact of returning soldiers, questioning the official narrative surrounding the conflict. Echoing this perspective, President Zelensky characterized himself as Ukraine's legitimate leader and labeled President Putin a war criminal, reflecting a view he claims is widely held internationally. Zelensky asserted that Putin actively seeks pretexts to prolong the war, driven by an unwillingness to negotiate directly with Ukraine or himself. Zelensky interprets Putin's stance as an attempt to delegitimize Ukraine as an independent entity. He expressed openness to dialogue with alternative Russian representatives, potentially prominent figures from business or regional leadership, should they demonstrate a genuine desire to end the conflict and possess the capacity to act independently of Putin, provided there is strong international backing from Europe, the United States, and Ukraine for such alternative channels. A recent interaction on the golf course between U.S. President Donald Trump and Finnish President Alexander Stubb is being highlighted as potentially pivotal in shaping Trump's perspective on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Sources suggest that the discussions held during this game significantly impacted Trump's thinking regarding Russia and its leadership. Finland's extensive and often challenging history with Russia provides its leaders with unique insights into Russian strategic thinking, negotiating tactics, and regional behavior. It is reported that President Stubb shared these insights extensively with Trump during their time together. Following the encounter, Trump released a statement praising President Stubb and emphasizing future cooperation. "I just played a round of golf with Alexander Stubb, President of Finland," Trump stated. He noted their success in a golf tournament and looked forward to strengthening the partnership between United States and Finland, specifically mentioning potential collaboration on acquiring icebreakers and delivering peace and international security. Significantly, Trump added, "President Stubb told me in the most powerful of words, United States is strong and back again." I agree. This statement came amid a period where Trump has increasingly voiced support for Ukraine, emphasizing the global necessity of continued assistance. His recent pronouncements reflect an understanding, potentially sharpened by his conversation with Stubb, of the historical pattern of Russian actions against its neighbors when international support wavers, leading to territorial seizure, suppression of democracy, and the establishment of puppet regimes. Further details emerged regarding the substance of the Trump-Stubb discussions. President Stubb himself reportedly confirmed the nature of their conversation. When asked by Trump if Russian President Vladimir Putin could be trusted, Stubb's direct response was no. The Finnish president indicated they spent approximately 7 hours together, covering serious geopolitical matters alongside the golf game. Stubb also reportedly mentioned that the U.S. is actively developing sanction strategies should Putin reject ceasefire initiatives or violate any agreed-upon truce. This sequence, the private discussion followed by Trump's public comments on potential sanctions and his reinforced stance on Ukraine, suggests a direct link between the golf course diplomacy and subsequent policy signals. The influence of this interaction is underscored when contrasted with some earlier statements. Observers note a marked shift or reinforcement in Trump's pro-Ukrainian commentary following the meeting. This aligns with President Stubb's own deeply held convictions, rooted in Finland's historical experience with Soviet and Russian aggression. Stubb has publicly articulated Finland's perspective, reminding international audiences that Finland lost significant territory, including areas where his own family originated, and its sovereignty was constrained during the Cold War, only fully regained after the Soviet Union's collapse. Stubb emphasized that Finnish support for Ukraine stems from this shared historical experience and a fundamental understanding of identity. He stressed a crucial point often misunderstood. The current full-scale invasion is merely the latest phase of Russian territorial expansionism that began much earlier, citing the 2008 conflict in Georgia and the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Therefore, according to Stubb, the war has effectively been ongoing for over a decade. The Finnish president framed the conflict as having stakes far beyond Ukraine itself, impacting European security, the United States, international law, and the global order. He warned starkly that allowing Russia to succeed in dismantling the Ukrainian state would represent a catastrophic loss not just for Ukraine, but for Europe, the West, and the United States. Stubb issued a direct caution. You cannot trust Putin. You cannot make a deal with Putin. Arguing such a deal would implicitly involve concessions beneficial to China as well. He asserted that the only path to a Ukrainian victory requires unwavering international support and dismissed any notion that Russian ambitions would end with Ukraine, describing Putin's mindset as inherently imperialistic. Underscoring this commitment, Stubb noted Finland's position as the fifth largest donor to Ukraine relative to its GDP, reaffirming Finland's pledge to support Kyiv for as long as it takes. So, the stage is set. Trump's gauntlet thrown down, massive tariffs threatening Russia's lifeline, stark warnings echoing towards Iran, and the world holding its breath for that crucial call between Trump and Putin. Will the Finnish president's stark warnings prove decisive? Can Putin navigate this economic minefield, or will his gamble on Ukraine finally backfire spectacularly? The pressure is immense, the stakes couldn't be higher, and the next move could reshape the global order. What do you think will happen? Will Trump pull the trigger on these devastating tariffs? Can a ceasefire ever truly hold? Let us know your predictions in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it informative and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping our world. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next update. Because this story is far from over. Thanks for watching,